I finally studied preflop cash game ranges in GTO Wizard, and to my surprise, these are actually much easier ranges than what I had expected, especially after coming from tournaments. And in this, I will show you basically how to play cash games extremely strongly. The assumption we are making is that it's a 2.5x raise size, that it's 100 big blinds deep with a sort of standard rake, as it were. So yeah, that's just going to make it, pretty straightforward. Obviously, if you're playing games like a different rake structure, or in the case of self-dealt cash games showing no rake, then obviously you'll make some adjustments. But yeah, this certainly help me out for playing online or in most normal cash game structures. So we'll just start by kind of going with like small blind where it falls small blind, and then we'll kind of go from there with also some raise, how to deal with raises, how to deal with free bets and all that sort of thing. And one pattern you're also going to kind of notice is how little cold calling is generally being done in cash compared to tourneys. But yeah, looking at the small blinds range, you can kind of see this is one of the rare cases where you sort of have a mixed strategy as such. But I think that for most purposes, you could probably just simplify just to just raising in most cases, and it just makes it a bit easier to remember compared to like mixing with nearly every single hand. But yeah, you can sort of see you kind of do need a hand like ace three off plus there, or king seven off plus, or a two cards eight off suited higher, or in this case like two cards suited five or higher in general. And the reason for this sort of requirement is because of the rake. When a rake is taking money out of the pot, it does mean you need to have a stronger hand to kind of compensate for the amount of rake that's kind of being taken essentially. But let's say that the small blind, let's say if they call first of all, just looking at the big blind's response, yeah, you can kind of see that, yeah, you're basically going to be checking a pretty large amount, but yeah, a lot of the suited 8x and 9x is going to be kind of going for it quite a lot here as the bluffs, also various, offsuit cards like high, low, or high mid that are kind of mixing a bit. And obviously like the obvious value, like all the suited broadways and all that. But let's focus a little bit more on what I have to do if the small blind raises, and I think it's good to start with just the later positions as a foundation and kind of work back from there because it just makes things easier to remember and to apply. And I'll do my best also to kind of mention the thresholds in a way that will be easy for you to remember it, where rather than sort of having to remember the picture of the whole chart, you just remember the thresholds. Like, okay, against raise, we need we continue with all the ace X, like offsuit or offsuit. We continue with virtually all the suit hanks at like the absolute bottom of the range. And then we basically continue with the offsuit eights plus is kind of a pretty easy way to remember. And it kind of like fill the gaps here with a few of like the, offsuit connectors and such. And then yeah, looking at sort of the free bet range, like obviously here we're not going to look at post flop day, we're only going to be looking at pre-flop. And if you are enjoying the video so far, then do make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel. Now you can see that a lot of the bluffs are coming from these hands, like these suited connectors like do a lot of free betting. It's hands I find a lot of players will just flat. I mean, in the past when I was, let's say, not as studied, I would just flat the suit connectors, just take a cheap flop, but it's a lot more profitable. As you can see here, well, not a lot more, but it's slightly more profitable just to raise these at a high frequency. Um, and yeah, you're also kind of seeing like some bluffs, also like ace five, ace four suited, some like random, like low cards, random, high cards, a random suit, like low cards, random offsuit, high cards here, and the obvious value combinations. And kind of noteworthy that you see like even a hand as strong as nines and pocket pairs like that just flatting and not free betting. Because again, if the rake kind of disincentivizes you to kind of call to some extent, but yeah, that's how it tends to work. And if the big blind does go for a free bet, then looking at the small blind strategy, yeah, you can see that there is still some flatting, but there's also going to be a lot of raising, like the obvious value combinations being tens plus, ace king, ace queen. And yeah, it's a pattern I've kind of noticed that ace king off is usually the hand that is usually the most common hand when looked at does a four bet jam. You also have like a few bluffs like king queen suited, king jack suited, ace queen off at some frequency. And then yeah, the free bet bluffs are like these sort of off stronger offsuit broadways, like the ace 10 off, king jack off, some of these hands, and some of the suit ace kind of mixing as well. And if you're like nine suited and a tiny bit of like connected eight suited hands. So that's kind of where the bluffs are coming from. And yeah, you sort of fill in the gaps with the calls, like calling a lot of nines and lower, falling out threes, twos, and fours. And a bit of calling, yeah, with like the suited broadways like to call quite a lot as well. And the suited ace will also like do a fair bit of calling, some suited kings. So you can kind of get a decent idea of the range, and you're in a case that finally the small blind does decide to four bet. And you can sort of look at the sizing as well. You can kind of see that, when the big blind does raise, it's again a fairly large amount just to, again, try and take down the pot pre-flop and not have to pay the rake. Because every time, it goes post-flop, rake's taken out of the pot and it just, reduces the amount you're winning in a sense. But yeah, basically, when we do have a four bet, you kind of see there's very little jamming from the small blind that you are continuing with a lot of your range, like the suit connectors are kind of mixing free bets, that were going free bets, now just because there's flatting that you are getting in like good enough odds to kind of continue against a very small four bet size. You're sort of again jamming like ace king off pure, a bit of kings, a lot of queens and jacks are kind of the value portion, and you sort of balance that with a few bluffs like the some of the lower suit aces seem to really like going for those sort of bluffs, especially along with a small combination of a few others. And yeah, like if you basically have a Broadway here, suit or offsuit, you're basically going to continue. Suited 9x also going to be good enough, suited kings and so forth. So you can see, yeah, it's a pretty wide range, and the small blind does 5 bet jam, then yeah, it's going to be very tight, like just calling with the pocket pairs, sixes plus, ace king and ace queen suited. So again, pretty easy to remember in that sense. And obviously, the first time you go for this video, you might not remember every single little detail, but as you kind of review it a few more times, say practicing it in some drills, referring to it, as needed, like between your cash game sessions, it will make it a lot easier to kind of apply in that sense. So that covers the battle of the blind, small blind versus big blind, and with that we can now explore how they might respond to a button raise. And also looking at the button range, you can see it's obviously going to be quite a bit tighter compared to MTTs, where you might see some of these sort of hands like still raising, as it were. Because yeah, again, the rake just makes it that, it's just you're not going to be properly like calling hands like ace three offsuit or ace deuce offsuit, because that property normally have an MTTs gets taken by the rake in cash. Then you do need like ace four offsuit plus. And also you'll notice in the pattern here as you are weighted more towards playing with a lot of suited hands, like all the suited queens plus, most of the suited jacks, any suited six or higher, like somewhat connected five or four or higher for the suited hands. And yeah, basically like you need an offsuit nine plus, and you're mixing with the king eight suit, 10-8, 9-8 is sort of the other threshold there. And obviously all the pockets also kind of being good enough to continue in the button for I think fairly obvious reasons. But yeah, in terms of how the small blind responds, you'll see again that you're never really going to be flatting. That's always going to be free bet or fold. But before I get to that, just looking at how the big blind response, you can see here that we do like the big blind's kind of the one position where we will do quite a bit of flatting. Pretty much everywhere else we are going to be just free bet or fold, which is kind of it makes it a lot easier to remember after remember, okay, I call with these ranges, I free bet with these ranges, because that's part I think what makes the MTT sounds a little bit tougher to remember all the ranges. Also, the fact I have a lot of very different stack sizes MTTs obviously is also a big factor, of course. But yeah, you can sort of see that again, like you're calling nearly everything suited in the big blind just because you're getting such a good price for only needing 1.5 big blinds when the pot is already four. So as you can see, you're only 27.3% pot odds. I think you're getting a good enough odds, yeah, with any like suited jack or better, any suited six or better, any sort of slightly connected low card hands as well are going to make the cut as well, pretty much. But yeah, we're going to be a lot tighter with the offsuit. So again, like the 9x offsuit, like two cards nine or higher is what you need. Some of the weakest offsuit aces do fold, just not getting the right price when the rake is being taken out. And then sort of looking at kind of the free betting range, it's the obvious value aces to nines, ace king, ace queen, ace jack suited, king queen suited. And then you're just mixing it in with some bluffs like the suited ace, like ace five suited, ace four offsuit. Again, we see this pattern that they're very often good candidates to re-raise in different spots. We saw it before, like even with the small blind versus big blind. And again, there's a lot of those suit connectors, like especially these mid kind of suit connectors, like Jack 10 suited to 7-6 suited. Yeah, they really like to free bet in this spot because you sort of get a lot of hands that dominate you to kind of fold in that case. And speaking of that, yeah, let's say if we do look at the big blind raising to a free bet, and notice how the big blind's going for a very big size, again, just trying to take the pot down pre-flop and not have to pay the rake on the pot. Because again, you don't pay rake when and I mean, it depends on the server. Like when I play on Ignition, it's a bit different. But in most places, you don't have to pay rake if it doesn't go post-flop. But yeah, for this one, you can see the button response that much like in MTTs, where you're sort of going to meet a small blind or big blind free bet with a lot of flighting. That's a principle for MTTs that does carry over to cash games as well. As we can see here that all the suited two cards nine or higher are going to be good enough to continue. Again, really prioritizing the suited hands like the suited aces over the offsuit hands, where even hand like king jack off is just not, or ace ten off is just not going to make the cut here. Then you need ace jack off or king queen off, like the very best kind of broadways to offsuit to continue. And yeah, like with the suit connectors, like the 9, 8, 8, 7 just often going to be dominated by the bluffs. So that's why like 7, 6, and 5, 4 suited a lot less likely to be dominated. So that's kind of why those hands prefer to call. Sixes plus are kind of like pure, continuing. And yeah, in terms of where the free bets, or actually the four bets are coming from, again, for ace king off is just kind of a nice hand to four bet jam in a lot of cases. Whereas the suited ace king, a kind of pattern we see a lot in cash that often you'll want to four bet not all in, just because the suited gives that extra 3% equity and just makes it, more importantly, a lot easier to play the hand post flop when you can make when you can make the nut flush in a sense, in a more direct way. And yeah, also kings and queens and a little bit of jacks and tens and ace four, ace three sort of kind of like the all in bluffs that are balancing out the ace king to not be like totally predictable. And yeah, even ace, like again, someone we pick up from MTTs where okay, you don't do as much playing with aces in cash games as MTTs to a free bet. But you do have like that SPR of about, if we call about like four or so. Actually, it'd be less than four, about like 3 to 4. Then yeah, that's around the right range where you can sort of flat the aces when it's like an SPR less than four going to the flop. But let's say if the button does jam all in this spot, then yeah, you can see big blind is going to be very tight, like just aces to sevens. Because yeah, the pocket pairs kind of decent equity against most of the ace king that is going to be most of their range, and offs like the ace four, ace three suited bluffs, or ace five, ace four suited bluffs. And yeah, like ace king and yeah, ace queen suited, like ace queen off is just not going to cut it here. But if they do decide to four bet not all in, then yeah, you just don't do. I mean, to be fair, actually, you do a fair bit of five bet jamming just because you're kind of out of position again. Would be happy to take it down, pre-flop and not pay the rake. So it's just, kings to tens doing a lot of the jamming and ace king. And that being balanced with like these ace five suited, ace four suited bluffs just to get a lot of those better ace X hands to fold essentially. Because let's say if the big blind does go all in, as we can also see here that we are going to be continuing with all our suited broadways and ace queen offsuit and the suit connectors, because the suit connectors do play quite well against sort of the correct four betting range that you can hit your two pair or your straight or your flush, but you're not going to like lose a lot of money if you miss the flop essentially with suited connectors. But if the big blind does go for the five bet all in, then yeah, button is just again going to be pretty tight. And you can sort of see this range being fairly consistent across the board. It's like basically, aces to some like mid pocket pairs, ace king, and a bit of ace queen suited. Like it's pretty uniform, and I think that's one thing that's nice about starting these spots is that yeah, you can basically just look at the charts, just kind of see the patterns that are recurring, and then you kind of really have to remember it sort of one time for a lot of different situations. Rather having to remember a different thing for almost every situation, which can be the case sometimes with the tournaments, where one small change position can have a big impact. What I observed is not quite as true, I think, for the for the cash games. And yeah, if the small blind does call, that is one point I should touch on. Where again, yeah, the big blind is going to be a bit tighter. Like these 9x offsuit hands are going to start folding more when it's two players in the pot. Again, just keep in mind you are losing a bit from the rake, but still, yeah, going to be like just free betting like all of the suited cards nine or higher and some suited connectors and some of these random like high card, low card hands or two mid cards hands a little bit just for balance. But and some of the strongest offsuit ones. But you can see this one's definitely a little bit more of a linear range when you have two callers, as it were. Like you need a hand that can sort of stand against two ranges, basically. But yeah, let's say if the small blind does, go for the free bet. Again, you can see that when a player raises another player free bets, that your range is going to be super, super tight. And that's again because the fact you're just never really flatting a free bet here. And that's kind of true in a lot of different cases that once it's a free bet pot and and you're sort of an next person who acts against like the cold free bet, then yeah, in that spot, like you're gonna just be jamming like ace king offsuit. And yeah, the bluff's gonna be like well maybe bluffs isn't the right word, like ace queen suited, and then yeah, some like bluffs with king, queen suited, jacks, and smattering of tens just to kind of balance out the range in that way. But and the rest you are just raising like aces, kings, queens, tens. Basically, the stronger suited draw is like ace 10 suited plus king jack suited plus ace queen off plus. And if the big blind does go for the four bet raise, the cold four bet, then yeah, against a cold four bet, you just play old man coffee, aces, kings, queens, ace, king, and you never call. You just yeah, always go all in this spot. And yeah, again, you have to be super tight. Like ace king off is not going to be good enough to continue against a five bet all in when you have like a cold four bet essentially. So that means that yeah, small blind is if they fold, then yeah, similar story with big blind, except big blind you do get continue a little bit more with the ace king offsuit and the jacks is kind of the difference. So yeah, with that we kind of have a breakdown of this. Like let's just say if the big blind does fold, just to cover the final situation with the button. Then yeah, in this case, basically, yeah, you are going to see the button actually again calling quite a lot versus small blind. It's a common pattern once again that you're just not going to do a whole lot of free betting. So it's going to be continuing with most of the pocket pairs, some suited connectors, some suited aces, any suited cards nine or higher. Like it's very similar to range we saw against the big blind actually, that when you're facing an out of position free bet, it's kind of similar principles like jam ace king offsuit, jam bit of jacks and tens. And we see it blend some with a few bluffs like the queen jack suited and a tiny bit of the ace five suited, ace four suited. And yeah, just the non all in's gonna be yeah, aces, kings, queens, ace king suited, and just a few bluffs on kind of the bottom end of the range just to balance that at a low frequency. So yeah, that's sort of covering yeah how to deal with the button. And what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to divide this video into a few different parts. Kind of an idea that one of my friends shared recently was sort of basically not just like doing one video, but kind of turning it doing a little bit of a series so you can kind of follow along and just to break it down into sort of more manageable steps. So yeah, this part one was covering the cash game pre-flop ranges when either the button, the small blind, or the button or the small blind enters the pot. And then the next ones we're going to see what happens when the cut off, the hijack, or the under the gun enters the pot. It is really this one we are seeing, yeah, it is kind of six max cash, and obviously you have like nine max cash, it's a bit more complex, but just at least give us like a solid starting point, as you get more experience, you can then, sort of expand to the nine max and sort of learn those ranges, like once you've mastered the six max ones in a sense. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, comment below, what do you think is easier? Do you think cash games, or do you think tournaments are easier, and why? I'd say that, from this, I think that pre-flop cash games definitely easier, but yeah, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.